What happens when Amara, a helpless young girl, is forced to marry a cold, ruthless businessman, Obina Wosu, who sees marriage as nothing but a business deal to save her family? Will Amara's innocence melt Obina's stone-cold heart, or will his arrogance crush her spirit? Stay tuned to Innocent Stories to find out. If you're new to our channel, please subscribe and give us a like, it means the world to us. The early morning sun streamed weakly through the cracked windows of the old room, casting faint light over the peeling wallpaper and the worn-out mattress on the floor. In the farthest corner of the house, hidden away from the grandeur of the main mansion, lived Amara Okafor, the true heir of the Okafor fortune. Though no one treated her like it, she was a shadow in her own home. Once, when her mother was alive, Amara had lived like a princess. Her mother, Chioma Okafor, had been the pride of the business world, beautiful, strong, and the sole heir to the sprawling Okafor enterprises. But everything fell apart when Chioma died in a tragic accident. Amara was only 10 years old when she lost her mother, and with her mother's death, her world crumbled too. Within a year, her father, Amara Okafor, remarried. He chose Ngoy, a woman who wore expensive perfume and smiled too sweetly, but her heart was made of stone. And Ngoy came with her own daughter, Chidinma, a spoiled, vain girl who quickly became the apple of Emeka's eye. Amara, on the other hand, became invisible, nothing more than a burden in the house her mother had built. Can you imagine being erased in your own home? Keep watching Innocent Stories to see how Amara faces this betrayal. Her new life was filled with endless chores. From the moment the sun rose until late into the night, Amara was kept on her feet, cooking, cleaning, polishing silverware, washing Chidinma's endless pile of clothes. While Chidinma went to private school in designer uniforms, Amara was sent to a rundown public school wearing Chidinma's old clothes that barely fit. When Chidinma dined on lavish meals, Amara ate leftovers, if there were any. Her once proud father said nothing. Amara, who had once lifted her up and called her his little princess, now barely looked at her. Every time she caught his gaze, there was guilt in his eyes, but he never lifted a finger to stop Ngoy's cruelty. It was as though her very existence was a reminder of a past he wanted to forget. Ngoy's shrill voice cut through the morning air, "The kitchen is filthy. What are you waiting for? Move your lazy feet." Amara wiped her hands on her threadbare apron and rushed down the narrow servant staircase. She kept her head down as she passed Chidinma, who lounged on the ornate living room sofa, scrolling through her new phone and sipping freshly squeezed orange juice. Chidinma smirked as Amara passed by. "Don't forget the laundry, servant girl," she sneered, tossing a balled-up sweater at Amara's feet. Amara bent to pick it up without a word. She had learned long ago that arguing only made things worse. As she scrubbed the kitchen floor on her knees, she heard Ngoy speaking loudly in the next room, deliberately within earshot. "I don't know why Amara keeps her here. She's a waste of space, a charity case. She should be grateful we haven't thrown her out into the streets." Emeka's weak voice mumbled something in response, but Amara didn't catch it. She didn't need to. He would do nothing. He never did. Tears stung her eyes, but she angrily blinked them away. Crying solved nothing. She had made herself a silent promise: one day, she would leave this house and never look back. But dreams seemed so far away when reality chained her down. What if Amara's chance for freedom comes at a heartbreaking cost? Don't miss what happens next on Innocent Stories. When night fell, Amara sat by her small window, hugging her knees to her chest. From here, she could see the sprawling grounds of the Okafor estate, the gardens her mother had once lovingly tended. Now they were overgrown and wild, just like her life. She whispered into the dark, "Mama, I miss you." The wind rustled the trees outside, almost as if whispering back. Meanwhile, across Lagos Island in a towering skyscraper lit up against the night sky, another soul was fighting his own silent battles. Obina Wosu, the ruthless CEO of Wosu Holdings, stared out the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office. His empire stretched across the country: hotels, tech companies, real estate empires, all under his command. To the world, he was untouchable, powerful, heartless. But hidden behind the legend was a broken man. 2 years ago, a brutal car accident had left him partially paralyzed, wheelchair-bound, physically weaker, though his mind was as sharp as ever. His longtime fiancée had abandoned him soon after, unable to bear a future tied to a broken man. Since then, Obina had lived in isolation, surrounded by wealth but no warmth. And yet, tonight, as he sipped his whiskey and gazed at the city's glittering skyline, a cold plan was forming in his mind. A plan that would change his life forever. A plan that involved marriage, not love. He didn't believe in such foolishness anymore, but a contract, a transaction. Obina smiled bitterly. Let them come crawling to him. He was ready. The Okafor mansion, once a symbol of prestige and old money, was beginning to show cracks, not just in its walls, but in its foundations. Amara Okafor sat in his private study, his head buried in his hands. Piles of unpaid bills, foreclosure notices, and threatening letters from the bank littered his desk. His once thriving business empire, a mixture of real estate, oil contracts, and trading companies, was falling apart faster than he could save it. It had started with a few bad investments, then an economic downturn, then a series of lawsuits that drained what little liquidity he had left. Now he was drowning. The whispers in the city grew louder every day. The Okafors are finished. Their wealth is just for show. They're one step away from disgrace. And in the middle of this slow collapse, Emeka's so-called friends had all disappeared. Every call he made for help was either ignored or politely declined. You should have been smarter, one former associate had sneered on the phone. You married a liability. That Ngoy and her daughter spend faster than you can make. Aincha knew it was true, but he didn't have the strength to face it. Instead, he allowed Ngoy to continue hosting lavish parties, buying designer clothes for Chidinma, and pretending their life hadn't changed. Meanwhile, in the shadows, Amara continued to work like a slave, unnoticed and unloved. One hot afternoon, after yet another humiliating meeting with a bank manager, Aincha returned home in a foul mood. Ngoy was waiting for him in the living room, sipping wine in a silk robe, scrolling through her phone as Chidinma tried on new clothes from an online shopping spree. How was it? Ngoy asked lazily, without looking up. Aincha dropped the thick file he was carrying onto the coffee table. We're finished, he said bluntly. If we don't find an investor or a partner immediately, the company, the house, everything will be gone. Chidinma gasped dramatically. What? But Daddy, what about my birthday party next month? I already invited half of my school. Ngoy frowned, setting down her glass. You're exaggerating. There must be something you can do. Aincha sank into a chair, exhaustion written all over his face. I've called everyone I know. Nobody is willing to risk their money on us. They say I'm no longer reliable. The room fell into a heavy silence. Then Ngoy straightened up, a sly look coming into her eyes. There might be someone who can help, she said carefully. Someone powerful enough to rescue us, if we're willing to make a sacrifice. Aincha looked at her suspiciously. Who? Obina Wosu. At the mention of the name, a chill seemed to sweep through the room. Everyone knew Obina, the ruthless billionaire, the kingmaker who had the power to destroy or uplift businesses overnight. Since his accident, he had become reclusive, but his influence was stronger than ever. Chidinma wrinkled her nose. Isn't he crippled? Ngoy waved her hand dismissively. Who cares? He's rich, and he's looking for a wife. Aincha stared at her, horrified. You're suggesting one of our daughters marry him? Not our daughters, Ngoy said quickly. Just Amara. Chidinma clutched her chest in mock relief. Thank God, I almost fainted. Emeka's face twisted painfully. Amara? She's just a child. Ngoy rolled her eyes. She's 18, old enough. Besides, what good is she doing here? She's not even blood. She's Chioma's daughter, not mine. Let her be useful for once. Aincha looked away, shame flooding his heart. But deep down, he knew he was trapped. His pride, his legacy, his reputation, all of it hung by a thread. And so, the decision was made without consulting Amara, without even giving her a choice. That night, as Amara finished washing the dinner dishes, Ngoy summoned her to the sitting room. Amara, she said sweetly, too sweetly, your father and I have good news for you. Amara wiped her wet hands on her skirt and stood still, wary. You're going to get married. Amara froze. Married? Ngoy smiled like a snake. Yes, to a very rich man. A man who will take care of you. Isn't that wonderful? Amara's stomach twisted. But I don't even know him. What about my school? It doesn't matter, Ngoy said, her voice hardening. You're doing this for your family. The family needs you to step up as the first daughter. She turned to Aimcha, who sat slumped in his chair, unable to meet his daughter's eyes. Tears welled up in Amara's eyes, but she forced herself to stay strong. When, she whispered. Next week, Ngoy said, clapping her hands in satisfaction. Start packing. You're moving into your husband's house immediately after the wedding. Amara stumbled back into her tiny room that night, numb. The walls seemed to close in on her. The air felt too heavy to breathe. She lay on her mattress, staring at the cracked ceiling, her heart breaking. No one asked if she wanted this. No one cared. She was nothing more than a pawn to them, something to be bartered away to save a sinking ship. And somewhere in Lagos, behind the gates of a sprawling mansion, Obina Wosu sat in his wheelchair, reading a report on the Okafor family's situation with cold amusement. He smiled grimly. Everything was falling into place. The week leading up to the wedding passed in a blur for Amara, not because of excitement, but because of how rushed and hollow everything was. There was no bridal shower, no gown fittings, no ceremony rehearsals, just a few hastily made arrangements, whispered discussions between Ngoy and Aimcha, and a simple traditional wedding they could barely afford. Ngoy didn't even bother buying her a new dress. Instead, Amara was handed a faded ivory lace gown that had been used years ago by one of Ngoy's distant cousins. It smelled faintly of mothballs and was 2 sizes too big, but no one cared enough to adjust it. You should be grateful, Ngoy sneered as she tossed the dress onto Amara's bed. You're about to marry into wealth beyond your dreams. Many girls would kill to be in your position. Amara sat silently, folding the old dress across her lap. Inside her chest, her heart twisted painfully. She felt like a lamb being led to slaughter. On the morning of the wedding, Amara stared at herself in the cracked mirror propped against her wall. Her reflection was almost unrecognizable. Someone had applied light makeup to her face, more to make her look presentable than to celebrate her. Her hair was styled into a simple low bun, and she wore a pair of worn gold earrings that had once belonged to her late mother. A soft knock came at her door. She turned to see Aimcha standing there, awkward and uncomfortable in his ill-fitted traditional igbada. He didn't say anything. He just looked at her. And for a brief moment, Amara saw a flicker of guilt, regret, and helplessness. Papa, she whispered, her voice breaking, but Aimcha only cleared his throat and looked away. It's time, he said stiffly. And just like that, Amara's last hope crumbled. The wedding took place in a small community hall on the outskirts of Lagos, far from the grandeur that the Okafor name once commanded. A few people from Emeka's business circle attended, mostly out of curiosity, not affection. Amara sat beside Obina, her new husband, who was wheeled in by 2 sharply dressed bodyguards. He wore a sharp dark green igbada, and despite sitting in a wheelchair, he exuded power and cold authority. He didn't glance at her during the entire ceremony. Obina's face was unreadable, carved from stone, betraying no emotion. Amara could barely breathe under the weight of humiliation and sadness pressing down on her. When it was time for the vows, her voice trembled so badly that the officiant had to repeat the words twice before she managed to say, I do. Obina's voice, however, was firm and steady. I do. The signing of the marriage register was mechanical, almost like a business transaction. There were no kisses, no applause, just a low murmur of politeustrative polite claps as the deal was sealed. By evening, Amara was packed into a black SUV, her few belongings crammed into a small suitcase, and driven away from the only home she had ever known. No one hugged her goodbye. No one shed a tear. Chidinma even waved mockingly as the car pulled away. Good luck, cripple's wife, she called after her, laughing. Amara stared out of the tinted window, her vision blurred with tears. Her heart felt like it had been ripped from her chest. She was alone, utterly and completely alone. The car wound its way through the rich neighborhoods of Ikoyi, passing tall white mansions, manicured lawns, and guarded estates. Finally, they arrived at a towering mansion, Obina's home. The black iron gates opened silently, and the SUV rolled up the long driveway lined with tall palm trees and marble fountains. The house itself was massive, a modern palace with high glass walls, grand balconies, and sprawling gardens. As they pulled to a stop, a team of domestic staff in smart uniforms came out to meet them. They bowed respectfully to Obina as the bodyguards helped lift him from the car into his wheelchair. Amara stepped out slowly, clutching her small suitcase tightly to her chest, feeling completely out of place. Obina finally turned his cold eyes on her, studying her silently for a long moment. "You will live here now," he said curtly. His voice was deep, commanding, leaving no room for argument. "You will have your own room. You will follow the house rules, and you will respect my privacy." Amara nodded wordlessly, her throat too tight to speak. Without another word, Obina wheeled himself toward the grand entrance, leaving her standing alone by the car, the wind tugging at her thin dress. A maid came to her side, taking her suitcase gently. "This way, madam," the maid said kindly. As Amara followed the maid into the mansion, she felt the heavy doors close behind her, sealing her fate. She was now Mrs. Amara Wosu. But what kind of marriage would this be? She had no idea. All she knew was that her life would never be the same again. Want to know what happens next in this gripping tale? Subscribe to Innocent Stories and hit the bell icon to follow Amara's journey. The mansion was silent, so silent that Amara could hear the soft click of her sandals echoing on the marble floor as she followed the maid through the grand hallway. The place was beautiful, more luxurious than anything she had ever seen. But it felt cold, like a museum. It was not a home. It was a prison dressed in gold. The maid, an older woman named Mama Ada, was kind enough to show her around briefly. The mansion had 3 floors, a private cinema, a library, indoor and outdoor swimming pools, and endless empty sitting rooms decorated with imported furniture. "You will be staying here, madam," Mama Ada said, opening the door to a guest room on the 2nd floor. The room was large, much bigger than her entire corner back at the Okafor house. It had a queen-sized bed with soft cream sheets, a large window overlooking the gardens, and a private bathroom. Amara placed her small suitcase on the floor and stood awkwardly, unsure what to do next. "Master Obina's room is on the ground floor," Mama Ada said in a low voice. "He doesn't like to be disturbed unless he calls." Amara nodded quietly. "If you need anything, just ring the bell by the door," Mama Ada added, smiling kindly. "Welcome to your new home." Amara gave a small, forced smile. "Thank you." After Mama Ada left, Amara sat on the edge of the bed, her hands trembling in her lap. She had been married less than 6 hours. She was now living under the same roof with a man she barely knew, tied to a future she had not chosen. She felt like a stranger in her own skin. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she blinked them away fiercely. She had cried enough in her old life. Crying wouldn't help her now. She needed to survive this new one. Days turned into weeks. Amara settled into a routine, one that was lonely and mechanical. Obina kept mostly to himself. He spent most of his time in his study or holding meetings with his assistants. Occasionally, she would catch a glimpse of him wheeling himself across the wide halls, moving fast and efficient, his face a cold mask. They barely spoke. In the mornings, Amara would help prepare his breakfast, even though there were more than enough staff to do it. She would check if he needed anything, but he often dismissed her with a curt shake of his head. At noon, she would take walks around the garden, pretending not to feel the heavy stares from the security guards. In the evenings, she would read alone in her room, waiting for sleep to take her away from the emptiness. Obina never invited her into his personal space. He never touched her. It was as if she was invisible to him, much like she had been at the Okafor house. But unlike back home, here the loneliness was heavier, because deep down she had hoped, maybe foolishly, that marriage might offer her a chance at something different, a chance at being wanted. Instead, she was nothing more than an obligation, a sacrificial bride. One evening, about a month into their marriage, Amara sat on the balcony outside her room, watching the sunset. The sky was a burning canvas of orange and purple, the last light of day slowly fading into night. She hugged herself, feeling the cool breeze brush against her skin. Was this what the rest of her life would look like? Living in a golden cage, married to a man who didn't even see her? She didn't realize someone had approached until she heard the soft roll of wheels against the marble floor. She turned and found Obina watching her from a distance. For a moment, neither of them said anything. The wind carried the scent of fresh rain from the gardens below. "You don't have to stand," Obina said, his voice low. She nodded and sat back down, folding her hands tightly on her lap. Obina rolled closer, stopping a few feet away. His dark eyes studied her in the fading light. "Are you adjusting?" he asked after a long silence. It was the first real question he had asked her since their wedding. Amara swallowed. "I'm trying, sir." He arched an eyebrow slightly at the "sir," but said nothing about it. Another silence stretched between them. Then Obina leaned back in his chair. "You're free to do whatever you want here," he said. "You are not a prisoner." Amara nodded, though she didn't feel free. "And if you need anything," he added, his voice tightening slightly, "you can ask Mama Ada." He started to will himself away, but something in Amara broke. "Why did you marry me?" she blurted out, her voice cracking. Obina paused, his back to her now. For a moment, she thought he would ignore her question. But then he turned slightly, his face hidden in shadows. "Because I needed a wife," he said simply. And with that, he wheeled away, leaving Amara Aloniargos alone once again with the sinking feeling in her chest. It wasn't love. It wasn't even affection. It was just a transaction. And she was just the product that had been sold to him. Later that night, Amara lay on her large bed, staring at the ceiling. No matter how beautiful the room was, it couldn't erase the emptiness inside her. She closed her eyes tightly, willing herself to believe that one day, maybe one day, her life would mean more than this. But for now, she was just a girl surviving in a stranger's house, a sacrificial bride tied to a man who kept secrets hidden behind cold, sharp eyes. And somewhere deep inside the mansion, in the quiet darkness of his own bedroom, Obina lay awake, staring at the ceiling too. He could still see the sadness in her eyes. It clawed at something inside him he thought he had long buried. And for the first time in years, Obina Wosu felt something he didn't want to feel: guilt. Days passed, then weeks, and slowly, without either of them planning it, Amara's role in the mansion began to change. At first, she kept to herself, quietly blending into the background. But Obina's household was large and demanding, and despite having dozens of staff, no one seemed able to handle his personal care the way he truly needed. One morning, Mama Ada found Amara folding laundry in the servants' quarters. "Madam Amara," she said, a little breathless, "please come. Master Obina needs assistance." Amara frowned. "But there are nurses and staff." Mama Ada hesitated, looking uncomfortable. "He refused all of them today. He asked for you." Confused and nervous, Amara quickly wiped her hands and followed her through the house. She found Obina in his private gym, a large open room with glass walls overlooking the gardens. He was trying to transfer himself from his wheelchair to the weight bench but was struggling to find balance. The sight of him, so strong yet vulnerable at the same time, made something tighten inside Amara's chest. Obina glanced up, his face unreadable. "Come here." She obeyed without question. "Hold my arm," he ordered softly. Her small hands wrapped around his strong forearm as she helped guide him onto the bench. His skin was warm, and for a second, their eyes locked, something heavy and unspoken passing between them. Once he was settled, Obina leaned back, breathing out slowly. "Thank you," he muttered. Amara stepped back, keeping her eyes low. "Would you like me to call the trainer, sir?" He shook his head. "No, stay." And so she stayed. From that day, Amara began assisting him more often. It started with small things, bringing him his meals, organizing his medications, helping him wheel into the gardens for fresh air. Then it moved to more personal matters, adjusting his clothes, massaging his stiff legs when the cramps got too bad, even bathing him on days when he couldn't manage alone. At first, it was awkward. The first time she helped him bathe, her hands trembled so badly that she dropped the sponge into the water. Obina said nothing. He simply closed his eyes, his face turned away, letting her work in silence. Amara tried to be professional, focusing on the task at hand. But every time her fingers brushed his bare skin, her heart raced uncontrollably. He was not an old man. He was not broken. He was young, strong, intimidatingly handsome, and he was looking at her differently now too. One evening after dinner, Amara sat with Obina in the garden, helping him stretch his legs as part of his therapy. The night air was cool, and the moon hung low over the mansion. "Why do you do it?" he asked suddenly. She looked up, confused. "Do what?" "Serve me, care for me so quietly, so patiently. Most women would hate me." Amara swallowed, her throat tight. "I was raised to endure and to do my duty." Obina's jaw tightened. "That's not the life you deserve." She gave a small, sad smile. "We don't always get what we deserve." Their eyes locked across the dimly lit garden. For the first time, Amara saw something crack behind Obina's cold mask, a rawness, a wound still bleeding inside him. "You remind me," he said softly, "of what I thought didn't exist anymore." He didn't explain further. Instead, he grunted and wheeled himself back inside, leaving her sitting there, heart pounding uncontrollably in the dark. As the days melted into nights, the tension between them grew heavier, like thick smoke filling the mansion. It was in the way Obina's eyes lingered on her when she entered a room. It was in the way Amara's hands trembled whenever she helped button his shirt. There were nights when Amara lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling, her body aching with a strange, painful need she didn't understand. And there were nights Obina sat awake in his study, gripping the wheels of his chair tightly, fighting urges he hadn't felt in years. He wanted her badly, but he couldn't afford to touch her. Not yet, because once he crossed that line, there would be no turning back. And Obina Wosu didn't do anything halfway. He either claimed something completely or not at all. Will Amara and Obina ever bridge the gap between them? Find out in the next chapter on Innocent Stories. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button to stay updated on this emotional journey.